Good evening. Well, welcome to episode number 8 of Prophecy for the Last Hour. My name is Liz McGee, and I'm your host. And I have an exciting program tonight, lots of information. So, my title. I would like to demonstrate, in my opinion, it's all about my opinion, that Jesus was an Essene. Not only Jesus, his cousin John the Baptist, his mother Mary, the whole family, the whole clan were Essenes. And I think that's extremely important to have that understanding because, again, none of this biblical history happens in a vacuum. There's two things that God really watches over: his people and his word. And they're so intertwined in the whole storyline, you can't lose track of either one of them, or you're just totally out in left field. So all that being said, I have this opinion again, and starting with Genesis 3:15, and again, what happened in the garden. There is a verse that's very familiar to everybody, and it talks about this. After the Lord God came and he was speaking to Eve, Adam, and the serpent in the garden. And he told them that he was going, this is Genesis 3:15, that he was going to put enmity between you and the woman, between your offspring, which is the word seed, between her seed and between the seed of the serpent. And then this little 2-verse lines here. It goes, he will crush your head and you will strike his heel. That's a very idiomatic phrase. And truthfully, I've never heard a really good explanation from anywhere that satisfies me. So I'm going to tell you what I think it means. And after much study, and I do believe that there are 2 bloodlines that were started in the garden, and that this is the whole problem, and that there would be enmity, which you have to understand is the word hatred. There would be intense hatred between these 2 bloodlines until the time of the end. And then he will crush your head and you will strike his heel. You know what I think that means? I think that it's a war. And sometimes they're going to be up and sometimes you're going to be up. And that is truly and truly the history of the storyline going forward. In Moses' day, with David, with Solomon, and a lot of times the church, when Jesus came, we were up, man, or the sons of light were up, no doubt about it. But there have been very, very tragic and sad and evil times in the history of mankind also. If you have listened to any of my teachings, I absolutely believe we're in a war, a spiritual war. I absolutely believe that a lot of it is played out as a propaganda war. It is the war of truth versus the father of lies versus the Son of God, which is the truth. So to me, that's how I see it. Very simple, very clear. Now, what I want to talk about today is why I would say that Jesus was an Essene, who the Essenes were. What I want to kind of demonstrate is who the players were at the time of Christ and why that even matters, and what it says to us today and where we are at the end of the age, from this, looking at it sort of telescopically from this viewpoint. Now, until 1948, and again, if you've listened to any of my teaching so far, I really believe that we live in the time of the end. I believe, like Jesus said, as he told Daniel and many of the prophets, seal up a lot of this understanding. It's all going to come back out. I'm going to reserve it for my last days generation, and that's us. So I believe that this information is coming forward fast. I believe it's time for people to, and if you haven't been, it's almost too late. You have got to start to pay attention. You've got to start to get oil in your lamp, which is the greatest, purest doctrinal understanding of what is going on. Now, until 1948, we really had, and this is really, to me, this just says, the way I interpret this data is how could we not be in a war? We had very little, in a handful, maybe 4 references in all of ancient writings as to who these Essenes were. Now, how can you take a whole people group and you have nothing left? They're like wiped off the map. Josephus and Philo had a few comments about them in their writings. Not enough really to put together any kind of body of understanding of these people. But then 1948 came in the Dead Sea Scrolls. which I believe this God is never without a plan. I mean, believe me, people, he knew they were sitting there for 2,000 years almost. Boom, time. Hey, angels, go down. And they were discovered by some Bedouins. They were found in a very important geographic area, which is a little bit north of the Dead Sea, south of Jerusalem, close up to the Jordanian border, by the River Jordan. Very important geographic place, the desert. But they were found. And to this day, they have found, I think I had it written here, over 900,000 fragments and over 900 texts of writing. That is an amazing amount of information, coming boom forward to us 2,000 years later. So let me just start here now to talk about at the time of Jesus, because the Essenes were obviously, nobody disputes the fact archaeologically or geopolitically that they were players now that we understand this at the time of Jesus. So who were they? What were their beliefs? And okay, the main people groups or players on the scene, so to speak, at the time of Jesus. You had the Sadducees, because a lot of times we throw out these words of Sadducees. Jesus had dialogues with the Pharisees and the Scribes and Pharisees, but if you don't really understand who these people are and what they represented, you just miss so much and you fall into the trap of just kind of misinterpreting what's really going on. So you have these Sadducees. Now the Sadducees were probably numbered in the thousands, okay? They're a ruling class. These are the elitists. And I just have to say this, as I go through all these different people groups, truly and truly, because nothing's new under the sun. You can plug in the people groups today. Nothing's new. It's the same old battle. It's just same old fight, different players, new times. Seriously. So these were the elitists. These were the ruling class. These were the wealthy. Those that were highly educated, extremely wealthy. They were the status quo, and they had a lot to protect. They had gotten in with the Romans. At this point, Palestine is an occupied land. The Romans are ruling. The real rub here, you have to understand that in the history line, Moses established a priesthood, the Levites, and a high priest from Aaron on down, and it was supposed to just go forward. This is part of the genealogical. People were supposed to keep forward their genealogies, especially of these types of people groups. The Kohanim, the priests, and the Levites, and the high priest. And David, a couple little incidents happened, but David, the sons of Zadok, that David and Nathan the prophet established during his reign. These were coming forward, this family line, this genetic group was carrying forward the high priesthood. And it's very important to the storyline. But the Sadducees usurped it. It's like you're going this way, and then all of a sudden somebody comes along and takes your family tree over this way and was never meant to go that way. If you're a Jew, that is a very, very serious issue. So we have to really kind of understand this, why there was such a split. Because if you read a lot of the literature of the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Essenes, they're very upset about this wicked priest and about this state of affairs where they feel the truth has been hijacked. So this in the time of Maccabees, there was there was an insurrection, and this family line was very heroic and kind of won back the day for the Jews. And this is where you get the whole Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, where, I'm not going to go into the whole story, but it was an extremely pivotal and very important episode in the history of the Jews. And that family became very powerful. They had done a great thing in Israel. It's like they were the quote-unquote the royal family, the Kennedys of the time, whatever. And out of that family line, it came into, because then, power corrupts. That family line decided, well, maybe they'd like to stay in power. Once you get all that attention, maybe you really don't want to leave it and kind of go back to your little place. Let's see if we can kind of milk this thing. And eventually out of that line, they took over the priesthood. So this is really the rub, and it's very serious. So, they were just a few more things about them. They did not believe, again, in the resurrection. These are important doctrines. I kept stressing there will be a resurrection, a judgment, and this is core Hebraic belief. These are people groups that just, they ruled by power, greed, nepotism, bribes. I mean, I don't know, you just got to see it for what it is. Then you have the scribes and they were not loved by the people by any stretch of the imagination. This is where we get, we can see Jesus going into before the Sanhedrin. Again, all those priests, it was a usurped priesthood, a usurped Sanhedrin. When he went in before them and made his claim, they wanted nothing to do with him or his claims. The Scribes and Pharisees, this is a typical old boy network. These people that Jesus was really in dialogue with these people because they were just, a paid clergy, in other words. They were the teachers of the law, where Jesus kept saying, look, you are nullifying the words of God by your tradition. This isn't your place to be putting new spins on what my Father has been saying through the ages. This is Jesus talking. He runs against this. He accused them of stealing the keys to the kingdom. I've been over this because their theology would get in the way. This is really, all right, a paid clergy, in my opinion, can be quite a bit of a problem because this is where you get into an intellectual gospel. This is, and I've talked about that, where they didn't, they did believe in the resurrection, a judgment, and a redemption. They kind of bought into the storyline, but it was intellectual. It was not in the heart. It didn't really change their way of living. An interesting little story, Jesus with Nicodemus. Jesus is trying to explain to Nicodemus, who is a Pharisee, a scribe, about the new birth, and Nicodemus isn't getting it. He's asking these questions, and Jesus is saying, you're a teacher. You're a teacher in Israel and you don't understand what I'm saying? And that was like, how can this be? So how can, if the people that are like the blind leading the blind, this is what he's saying, if they don't get it and they're trying to teach you, well, then everybody's going to be in left field. You had another group called the Zealots. Now, the Zealots, again, it's the freedom fighters, the terrorists. One man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. These are people who really took up the sword. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. This is definitely a way of life that is definitely in contradiction to an Essene lifestyle, as we will see. But there was a small group within these zealots called the Sicarii. These really, and of course some historians of the with even Judas was a Sicarii. These are like truly the paid assassins. So you've got to see the people, because people, politics take it very seriously. You have from the total extreme, there was the largest group of people in Israel, and truly the largest group of people in the world today are people that are called, they're called the people of the land. They're called the Eretz. The Eretz, the meek. These are people who, they don't need a title. They don't need the wealth, power, prestige. They don't need really to be told what to do per se by this heavy-handed group of Pharisees who talk the talk but don't really walk the walk. They just want to, live a peaceable life and do good, love their God, and do good by the brethren. It's a very simple thing to them. And truly, these people of the land, the meek, they're still in the majority out there. Unfortunately, this is why the Lord always says, I judge the leaders and the elders of the people first. Because if they're not leading the sheep correctly, then whoa, we really do have a problem. So here you get back to the Essenes. Now, that this people group, people wouldn't even know about. This is amazing to me. But this is so why you have to be vigilant for the truth. More and more as I get more understand the heroes of the faith who have fought for the truth, what a debt we owe to them. You cannot sleep. Your enemy doesn't sleep. You can't sleep. Well, you can. The Lord will give peace to his people in the night season. But 150 years before the Essene split with the Hasidim, I know these are a lot of terms. You just kind of got to get these people groups right. It's like saying the Orthodox, okay? With the Orthodox of their day, again, 150 years earlier, over this concept of the usurping of the high priest and the Levites from the house of Zadok into this whole other group of people group. Now, they might have had, I think it was like a cousin. They had some very distant, removed lineage here, but they were not in direct line. And this is what's very important, and there were people that were really fighting over and tracking to keep the direct line of the high priesthood and the kingship, because you'll see Jesus was both a king and priest, why it was so important. But anyways, and this, the Essenes, see, and again, now maybe we can understand a little bit more of what the gospel is saying, but we've had so many problems through the centuries harmonizing a lot of the gospels, and a lot of it is because we have not really understood this people group of the Essenes. Now, they were kind of like, you could liken them today to the Amish almost, and they were rigid followers. Now, I won't say rigid, I will say sold out. These are people now, and this, I believe, is God-inspired, because, again, God watches over his people, but he watches over his word, and he has always had a remnant who really get it. These people see this thing spiritually. These people understand what's at stake. These people are willing to live, to lay down their life for this understanding, okay? These Essenes were a people group, again, in the thousands. These were all who could see their nation. You have to understand, Israel was going forward. We're now like maybe 1,000 years into the storyline of a lot of these prophecies from Moses and stuff. And they're getting tired. Come on. They're getting tired. They've had so much influence, being Hellenized now by the Greeks. They just went through that with the Maccabees. Now they got the Romans on their back. They've been dogged by the Canaanites forever. All these people groups. They're getting tired. But the point is, these Essenes, like I said, like the Amish, banded together as a community of people, kind of in covenant with each other, decide, no, we're going to stick this thing out through thick and thin. We're going to protect what we believe is the writings, the storyline, the understandings, the prophecies, the forward movement of what our patriarchs and our fathers gave us, starting from Adam. Because like I said, most people think this whole thing started with Moses, and it doesn't. It totally goes from Adam all the way through the patriarchs, Enoch, all the way up through Noah, all the way up through Shem, through Abraham, and then keep fast forwarding. There's always been this remnant of people who get it, who understand what's at stake. Now, there are, even in the Amish though, you have those that can live separate from the world. They're pretty good at no automobiles, no buttons, no whatever, no cell phones. They can do that. Then you have sort of more liberal lifestyles. Those that understand, and I'll tell you what the real secret between these people are. These are people who really understand. Like James said, you cannot love the world. We are told as Christians to hate the world. If you cannot be a friend of the world and a friend of God, you can't. I mean, it's spelled out perfectly clearly in our Gospels. It was spelled out in those days. We are at a war. You cannot play footsies with the enemy. You cannot be half in or half out. You're either all in or you're all out. You can be in left field and clueless, but you get a whole different kind of judgment. I mean, come on, people. He expected his people. This was the covenant they signed at Sinai with their God. He expected them. I will give you untold blessings. I will give you a special place, my inheritance, everything. But, there are some certain things we got to get straight here. But what you have to understand is the Amish, like today, because they're all over the country, they're very liberal. Some of them I've met and you talk to them, and they're kind of like, yeah, I'm kind of Amish, and I can't remember what the denominational is, like kind of ones removed from Amish. I can't remember what it is, but they're much more liberal than their brethren back in Pennsylvania or whatever. They have, they ride automobiles. They're not in a buggy. They will make concessions with the world, whatever. I'm just saying that this is a reality, how people groups work together. But the more important point is, this was the people group that Jesus, or let me put it this way, this was the people group. When the Holy Spirit, up here, he decides, this is probably a really bad analogy, he's zooming around trying to find a virgin in which to plant, the Messiah of the whole world, Jesus, and he finds a virgin, Mary, right? They try to make this out like Mary is just this lost little girl, and Jesus comes out in her. How do I say this? There is the most unbelievable, rich understanding of who these people were in their times. They are not isolated people just picked out of nowhere. I will tell you, Mary came from an Essene family. Now we know John the Baptist was an Essene. Just about everybody agrees on that. He was a prophet. He probably resided much in his youth growing up and everything down in the camp, the Essene camp that they were discovered down in Jordan. But I'll tell you, these Essenes were all over the nation. They had many other areas in which they had their little communities. You could be the Essene type like John the Baptist was, and you were celibate, you were sold out, you gave up everything, you lived communally, your whole life really was dedicated to the Torah and to prayer and to worship. Don't think these people, sometimes I'd like to go up on a mountain and be just like that. But that is what we find a lot of times in their writing, some of it shows this kind of dedicated community to live a life separate from the world, okay? But then you had other groups out there. They were allowed to marry. They could have children. They did work for a living. They did live amongst the Gentiles or even amongst those their brethren who they would consider kind of, what would be the word? I'm just trying to, lukewarm or whatever, okay? This is where you get Mary. This is where you get Joseph from this. This is where you get Elizabeth and Zechariah, who were John the Baptist's parents. They were married. This group was allowed to kind of act out or their vocations, some of them a little more liberally per se, but there was that really hardcore group in the desert who were, again, the scribes copying these scrolls, reading, discerning, praying, trying to continue to keep it forward. You understand that when John the Baptist came out of the wilderness, and came right out of that area, went to the Jordan and started baptizing, okay? You got to ask yourself, well, where did this guy come from, right? I mean, they make it out to like he just came out of nowhere. You got to say, Jesus called him the greatest prophet that ever lived. John, and there's so much, like again, I say people, you got to start reading. There's so much information. John the Baptist, his parents died. They were killed, murdered by, we'll just call them the prophet haters, whatever. And he was an orphan at a very young age. So what do? But if they're in a Essene group and these are community people, they don't give him to the state and he doesn't get adopted by somebody. No, they bring him into the community and he's a perfect candidate to join the more celibate Essene group down in the desert. That's where he went. That's where he was. He spent his whole life. He was so Torah knowledgeable, so filled with the Spirit, so zealous, so this guy, and getting it. You have to understand something. There are certain people who just they get the scriptures. This is everything to them. He got it. He understood. And then the Holy Spirit said, okay, fine. You want to be my man? Let's go. I'll lead you to, we're ready. It is go time anyways. Yes, the Messiah is in your midst. Let's start, okay? But it didn't come out of nowhere. You know what I have learned, and this isn't just an interesting personal revelation to me lately, but do you know what the greatest form of worship is? The greatest form of worship is Torah study. When I say Torah, and it's where we like, is the scriptures, the writings, getting wisdom. Like I said, I used to think it was, like maybe feeding the poor or just singing, worshiping, which is a big thing today, worshiping. No, you know what? And this is part of the problem. We have got to get back to this. It's Torah study. You have to know your scriptures, your writings, or you will be deceived. The greatest form of worship is Torah study. So here is John, probably the best and brightest in Israel in that day. Now, Mary was Jesus' mother. She was in Essene. She was also, her parents were, well, I don't know if I should say murdered. She was left an orphan. She was what was called, you got to get something, a temple princess, okay? I'll tell you a little secret. The greatest goal of any young virgin in Israel since the prophecy was given Isaiah was to be the virgin that would bring forth this deliverer, okay? Bar none. There was a whole class of, well, I wouldn't say a whole class. It'd be like, I mean, if you were a Torah observant young woman who, in this Essene community where God is really important, you'd be daydreaming about it. Oh my gosh, could I be the one? Now, let me just say something about this, because people like this Jesus born of a virgin, there's a lot of, but I'll tell you something, that is so critical and so precise. Yes, Jesus was born of a virgin. The virgin is in Israel at the time is a very small, limited, a girl between 12 and 14, 16 maybe, that, because after that she's going to have, so if it doesn't happen, you know, if you think you're going to be the mother of the Messiah and you're in that window of 12 to 16, you hit 16, it's over. You didn't win that lottery, okay? That lot didn't fall on you, okay? You got to move on. You got to get married. You got to do whatever, okay? Mary was of that age demographic. She was of that understanding where she, because when the angel came to her, she was not like freaked or she was a little startled. You know, I mean, all of a sudden you're in a room alone and you look and there's somebody there, but their dialogue, she knew exactly what he was talking about. And she was like, peace, well, hey, be it done to me. Maybe she did jump up and like praise the Lord. We're not, how do we know? But the point is, she knew exactly what was being spoken to her by the angel. She had no problem that it was an angel. Got to understand, we're the only people that have problems with the supernatural, us late-day Laodicean kind of church people. And it was done. She went to see Elizabeth. Elizabeth pregnant with John the Baptist, her cousin. See, these are family, these are kin people. You understand? These are clan. This is like the whole family. Joseph, another player in this thing, Joseph of Arimathea, who is Jesus' uncle. Actually, he is the uncle of Jesus and Mary. Wait a minute, I have to get back to my notes probably. I might get a little bit, yes, to Mary and Joseph. If you really look at some of these lineages and people are really going back and piecing this thing together, Jesus had brothers and sisters. Oh, well, yeah, we know that, okay? You know, and I probably, you know, and they want us to think that Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, this little family all by themselves, like almost alone in the universe. No, they came from the most tight-knit, beautiful, kind of clannish group of people on the planet. Okay? They're loving each other. They're loving God. They're believing their prophecies. They're living it out, okay? They're anticipatory. But the thing is, they're under extreme persecution. Now, Jesus, I want to read you just this little thing. Listen, we think Jesus was born just, it was like a Lone Ranger in this thing. No. Jesus forsook all material. That Jesus forsook all material